Hi, everybody. Welcome to our second FutureFlow session here at Living Future 2024. I'm Avinash Rajagopal, Editor-in-Chief of Metropolis and newly a proud board member of ILFI. I do that just for the applause. How many folks here were at yesterday's FutureFlow session? Can I see a show of hands? Amazing! We're glad to have you back. We're glad to have you back. We had such a fantastic session today. We had Josh Jacobs talking to us about, the journey we've had linking procurement and carbon. We had Ganesh Nayak here talking about inclusivity, designing for people with disabilities, and why, when we don't design for everyone, we're really designing for no one. We also had the amazing Steve Nygren here talking about Serenbe and his beautiful biophilic-driven approach to community development. And of course, we had the amazing Upali Nanda give us a presentation about the connections between our brains and climate change. It was mind-blowing. Pun intended. Come on. Okay, good. Great. Thank you. Right on cue. Today, we're going to have a series of talks that actually build on those themes, and I'm sure you'll be able to make connections between what you heard yesterday and what you hear today. So look out for those. There's some amazing speakers in the lineup today. So as it was yesterday, today's speakers also are really pushing the boundaries on what's possible. They're asking us the provocative questions. They're imagining things that are not yet here, but that are possible in a regenerative future. So super excited to have these speakers come speak to us today. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our very first speaker, Adele Houghton, who is president of Biositu, LLC. Adele is an expert at the intersection of buildings, public health, and climate change. And today, she will be talking about impact beyond the property line. If the title is not exciting enough, she's going to be talking about how architectural design can really connect with community health and also planetary health. Adele, thank you so much. Welcome to the stage. Let's give her a warm welcome, folks.
Thank you. I will admit it's a little bit intimidating to start off this closing session, but I know there are a lot of friends and fellow travelers here. So in that spirit, I'm going to share a little bit of kind of more personal background about me and my journey, and hopefully it'll resonate with many of you in the room. When I graduated from architecture school in 2003, I was ready to save the world. I had seen firsthand as an architectural intern how much waste and environmental harm is caused by construction projects. But a new way of reducing that impact was out in the market and quickly entering mainstream architectural practice. I jumped into the green building movement full of energy and excitement. First as a sustainability consultant for an architecture firm in my hometown of Houston, Texas. I don't know if Catherine is still here. Yeah, shout out to Kirksey. And later at the Green Guide for Healthcare. It was such an exciting time, as many of you guys remember. The sheer square footage of green buildings under construction was rising exponentially every year. At the Green Guide, we talked about the health co-benefits of green healthcare facilities. We shared research linking specific design strategies with positive health outcomes inside the medical campus, in the surrounding neighborhood, and in the global supply chain. Eventually, the entire green building movement went all in on health. It was great. There was just one problem. Even as the square footage of green and healthy buildings continued to grow, it became increasingly clear that we were not having the impact that we had intended. According to the United Nations, per square foot greenhouse gas emissions have risen over the past decades, in spite of the exponential growth in green and healthy building construction. The US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention here in Atlanta report that key health indicators tied to the built environment, like obesity and asthma, are either getting worse or not budging. This is in spite of the emphasis in green and healthy building guides on designing spaces that encourage physical activity and deliver clean indoor air. Of course, these are crude indicators, but given how many building codes in the US have adopted green building design requirements, it's dispiriting to think that our industry hasn't even nudged the trend lines for such important and fundamental environmental health goals. A few years ago, I began to wonder what we might be missing. If the strategies we use to build and operate green and healthy buildings are evidence-based and validated as individual interventions, why haven't they made a difference at scale, even in communities where they're required? I realized that the fields of public health and community planning had begun to map out the relationship between land use design and certain health outcomes like asthma, heat exhaustion, and traffic-related injury. So I went back to school myself and started mapping those same pathways down to the building scale. I realized that those of us who work in the real estate, design, and facilities management world view the built environment as a bunch of individual parcels of land that are only connected to surrounding properties through shared infrastructure like streets and pipes and electrical lines. The building and zoning codes that regulate what we can do on a property reinforce that viewpoint. And investors expect a return on investment that is generated entirely inside the property line. The problem with this approach is that our actions inside the property line necessarily influence larger systems, like floodplains, traffic and air pollution, the neighborhood economy, the urban heat island, access to fresh and healthy food, access to green space. A single building project or renovation isn't necessarily going to change an entire system on its own, but if every project pretends that its influence ends at the property line, local governments are left with only rights of way and public property to work with. No wonder communities that have committed to meeting the Paris Climate Agreement are not on track to do so. They can't do it without the building sector. After all, buildings are responsible for 40% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So what can we do? Well, we could start treating the property line as a place of exchange rather than a barrier, and expand our understanding of where value can be generated and for whom. In 2022 and 2023, I ran a proof of concept pilot with funding from the American Institute of Architects and Harvard University to see if taking that approach made business sense. We called the method we were testing the alignment process. It involves two steps: neighborhood data and participatory community engagement, which facilitates the process of finding common ground across stakeholder groups. Three projects participated in the pilot: a scattered site affordable housing project in Albany, New York, a wellness center and urban farm in Buffalo, New York, and the adaptive reuse of a historic mill in Northern Virginia. The purpose of the first step is to map out the systems that will be influenced by the proposed project. We used open source neighborhood scale data on three topics: the social determinants of health, current health status of adults in the neighborhood, and neighborhood vulnerability to climate change related events, which includes both infrastructure vulnerability and social vulnerability. The priorities for each neighborhood turned out to be different from each other because they each had a unique combination of natural environment, neighborhood layout, and neighborhood population. They were also different building types designed to serve different purposes in the community. This slide shows the 5 environmental health priorities coming out of the data analysis for the Buffalo project, and I'm just going to run through them very briefly. Industrial pollution was identified as a priority because of truck traffic and also contamination from industrial sites, both historic and current. Extreme temperatures is something that Buffalo confronts both in the summer and in the winter. And this neighborhood actually was confronting it with older infrastructure and housing stock that was inadequately insulated. Also, a high percentage of the residents in that neighborhood were living on a modest income and not able to afford climate-resilient retrofits. The neighborhood was also a heat island, ranging from 70 to 100% impervious surface. Public safety was also a concern in that neighborhood, particularly gun violence, which potentially was also connected to the obesity, diabetes, and hypertension priority because it had a very low percentage of adults who were able to physically exercise on a regular basis. The neighborhood was also located in a food desert, which meant that it was difficult to access fresh and healthy food, which is a risk factor for obesity. And then finally, mental health was identified as a high priority because the adults in that neighborhood were estimated to have a disproportionately high rate of depression and other types of mental health conditions compared with the county, the state, and the US average. So if you compare Buffalo to the other two pilots, you'll see that there are similarities like air pollution across all three of them, but the sources of that air pollution was actually different. So it was important to pay attention to that in the design. There were also differences like the vector-borne disease in Waterford, Virginia, and that was related to its rural context and the fact that they don't spray for ticks in Loudoun County. So after we had pulled together the data, our team of facilitators worked separately with the community, the development team, and local officials to annotate and tailor the initial data analysis to reflect the opportunities specific to each project. We then facilitated a multi-stakeholder conversation to create an aligned vision for the project that would generate tangible benefits for each stakeholder group. For Buffalo, that meant creating a welcome, inclusive design and designing indoor-outdoor spaces that would encourage community members to walk through the property and use it as a community gathering place. In this way, the design would both encourage physical activity in the neighborhood and reduce the risk of obesity, while also responding to the public safety concern by creating a safe community space. Both of these outcomes would also benefit the mental health priority. The second major component of the aligned vision involved installing a greenhouse and maximizing vegetation on the site, including on the roof. In addition to creating access to fresh and healthy food in a food desert, which reduces the risk of obesity, the approach also would help mitigate the urban heat island, flood risk, and exposure to traffic-related air pollution. And then finally, through conversations with stakeholders, it became clear that this project could provide a community service as a resilience hub during extreme weather events, particularly extreme cold events. Since the project was located in New York State, it could apply for funding that would help it achieve a net zero status as an all-electric property. The three stakeholder groups even started conversations about potentially using the project to anchor a community solar or geothermal heat pump or microgrid. Again, when you look at all three of the pilots next to each other, you can see similarities, such as all three of them were committed to addressing social equity. You can also see differences, which reflect the different locations, different populations, and different building types. We asked participants to compare the alignment process with a typical approach to real estate development in their community. All three stakeholder groups responded that they expected to receive more tangible value from this project than a typical project in the community. They also reported feeling like both their own priorities and priorities of other stakeholder groups were better reflected in the final vision than on a typical project. And they felt that everyone's voice was heard. Now that the pilot is complete, we're moving on to the next phase of the project, and I would like to invite all of you to join us. Our goal is to reorient real estate development and facilities operations outside the property line, so that standard practice assumes that the most successful projects are the ones that provide the greatest community benefit. Imagine how quickly our neighborhoods and communities would change for the better if the decision to build or renovate a building amplified community assets, like community gardens and safe spaces to gather. Imagine if they further contributed to larger scale efforts to reduce air pollution, flooding, exposure to heat, and pedestrian safety. The first step is to build a community of alignment process practitioners. A playbook that will walk you through the alignment process step by step is available for free at the website on this slide. A demo of the neighborhood analysis is also available on that website. Later this year, we will launch an intensive hands-on training series for practitioners who want to start applying the alignment process in their daily practice. You can sign up on this same website to receive alerts for when the applications open. It doesn't make sense to approach building certification as though each strategy brings the same level of benefits to all locations, all populations, and all building types. We have the tools and data we need to tailor green and healthy building decisions so they generate the greatest possible co-benefits to both future occupants and the surrounding community. We just need to change the way we use them. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. I don't know if it's just me, but I sometimes have trouble describing what I do to people, so I'm going to use the words now to be a curious amateur, and I am pretty much the definition of that. I want to tell you how I became a curious amateur, though, and the story does start in the 17th century, but I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. And in that 17th century, some Dutch engineers came to the place where I grew up, the Fens, and they drained it. It used to be an enormous wetland, about the same size as Rhode Island. And they thought that they knew nature and that they could control it, but they probably didn't know it as well as they thought they did, especially for the complex system that it actually is. And so those rivers that used to flow through that wetland now flow through towns, and they flood on an ever-increasing basis. And the peaty soils that used to be carbon stores are now exposed and are huge greenhouse gas emitters. My town is home to the biggest brick pits in Europe, producing 5 million bricks a week. The chimneys dwarf these buildings, and they produce so much black smoke every day. And on the other side of that town is a nature reserve that my dad still manages. Fingers crossed he's retiring soon. And that's the background of my upbringing, and maybe it has influenced where I've got today. But I joined Mass Design Group, which is a non-profit design firm, and I joined as a structural engineer in Rwanda. And I thought I was kind of good at structural engineering. I thought I knew what it was, how to do it. I have a degree in the thing. And I got there, and my definition of structural engineering was way too narrow. I actually needed to know how to make the materials and build the buildings. So I went on a huge learning curve that has never stopped, really, but such an exponential learning curve and exploration of how to do these things that I would never think I had to do. So I explored sand pits that used to be riverbeds, and I went to forests that were actually only 4 trees deep because the forest had been deforested behind it, and it was just hiding it from the road. These are impacts that I never thought I would ever see or need to know about. And it just made me aware that my world had become ever more complex, but real and intriguing. So I've spent a decade looking at the impact of our decisions and looking at way too much data than I care to admit, but also getting my hands dirty occasionally. And over the last 3 years, I've really been asking, how the hell did we get here? In the hope that I might be able to understand, is there a way out of this situation we've put ourselves in? And what I'm starting to understand is that we suffer as a society from systemic separation, and it's being actively designed for. Those Dutch engineers that came and drained the Fens, it started before them as well. And we have separation between human and non-human life. We put the latter in planters, and we put them in nature reserves. We have separation between individuals, forced on us by telling us that we're competing consumers that don't have enough. We have separation between people, like us and them, and we have separation between even non-human life itself, farms and forests of monocultures just for the sake of efficiency. And it occurs in our industry as well. So we are siloed expertise that is separated by liability and licensure. And we have separation between designers and the things that they're designing for. People, materials, energy. And there's some stats that sum this issue up for me. As a construction industry, we produce 30% of all waste globally. We produce 40% of greenhouse gas emissions, and we consume 50% of all materials that are produced worldwide, which is 100 billion tons a year. You might be sitting there thinking 100 billion tons is a big number, but you are absolutely wrong. It is a very, 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 very big number. It is an Eiffel Tower every 3 seconds. That's 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. It's kind of scary, right? So, and I've said that the world we're living in suffers from separation, but that's not quite correct. I don't know if I'm getting too close to something. That's not quite correct. Those connections exist, but they're just incredibly frayed. And we need to think, how do we want to reweave this future before it completely unravels? To me, an abundant future is one of connectedness and relationships with human and non-human life. One where we understand our impacts, and because of our interconnectedness, we ultimately use our decisions to help all life to thrive. Because our impact is so big, we have such huge potential. We know that through the process of design, making, and growing spaces, we can heal our planet and society. But if we make those spaces and grow those spaces to also inspire life, willing values into the people that use them, then we can exponentially increase our impact too. I'm going to present 3 case studies, and they are they're far from perfect. And I'll be the first person to admit that they're not perfect. Sierra, Bainbridge, my colleague somewhere in the crowd will be the second person to tell you they're not perfect, but we are proud of them. And I want to acknowledge that I represent hundreds of people that worked for many years on these projects, so I'm grateful they need to talk about that. This is the Rwanda Institute for Conservation Agriculture. It serves as an alternative model for agricultural training. The site was overgrazed pastoral land that now supports a university campus modeling One Health principles. And that understands that the interconnectedness between human and ecological health is so vital. As you walk the fields on this campus, you'll see crops intertwined with native vegetation, all providing critical social and ecosystem benefits, such as biodiversity, pollination, food security, erosion controls, insect control, soil nutrients, water filtration. The list of the benefits goes on, but that's kind of the point. It's complex. And the buildings are made from compressed earth blocks about this big, actually 2.5 million of them. And you can walk between the pit where those blocks are excavated, the place where they're pressed by hand, and then the buildings that they're put into. And when you can walk the length of your supply chain, you can really understand its impacts. We're very, very lucky on this project to have enough space to significantly expand the savanna woodland too. And that's the last remaining one outside of national parks in Rwanda. The reforestation will sequester more carbon than was emitted upfront in the construction and through the manufacturing of the materials. And since the project is 100% powered by renewable energy, that project will be climate positive within 15 years, and that forest will continue to grow. 2,500 people in the local communities worked on this project, and 35% of the construction budget went into their hands. We also designed all the furniture for this project to be made by local artisans using local materials. Over 60 expert weavers, potters, carpenters were connected together to combine their skills into furniture making, offering additional long-term economic diversity and preserving their craft. This is the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund campus. Their work combines protection of mountain gorillas and community programs aimed at training the next generation of African conservationists, and they're actually also based here in Atlanta too. 2 decades ago, we established a cooperative to turn volcanic stone, which is this nuisance rock just found in farmers' fields, into a beautiful cladding material. And the same cooperative, 15 years later, built the walls of these buildings. And Mass is also the contractor for this project, and we worked closely with village leaders who identified those who would benefit most from being involved in this work. And we also partnered with a local technical college to create a training program that workers would have certifications for. It's likely their first educational certification ever. We planted 250,000 plants, over 120 species on this project, representing the whole known floral diversity of the area. It was extremely difficult to find all of these species and then propagate them, but now they exist in this one site together. And in under 2 years, the Fossey Fund scientists have been able to see such rapid ecosystem health or healing that they're writing papers about it. But you don't need to be a scientist to appreciate it. You can go there and it feels vibrant, like almost vibrating with life. And you'll probably see kids on a school trip, and I hope that somehow it influences their worldview as they grow up. This is the full kill, and kill just means creek in Dutch. Second time Dutch people have come up. And that's in Poughkeepsie, New York. Over the centuries, urban design strategies have led to the creek to be buried, covered, and separated from the community. There are still residents that remember swimming in the creek in the summer, but it's very difficult to imagine nowadays because it's almost inaccessible, but it's also just become a waste dumping site. So this is an effort to reimagine the creek as an asset rather than a liability and reconnect a community that would benefit so much from access to nature. We investigated the relationships of this creek to its neighbors so that we took a walk in the creek and invited the neighbors to come along to join us and help map out its potentials. And what we found was a glorious world of ecology and also a history of injustice. The implementation of this project is being done in stages along sites along the creek to create vision. The first project is adaptive reuse of a factory for Scenic Hudson, which is a non-profit environmental group. At this location in the creek, you'll actually be able to access the water and get down in it. So hopefully by providing direct access to this water, we're able to, we hope that the community will then care and value the creek itself, and also it can be a place of joy and refreshment, particularly as the summers get hotter and hotter. At Mass, we're establishing the Abundant Futures Design Lab to meaningfully deliver more projects like this with immediate and long-lasting results. The lab will also focus on research, convenings, policy, and teaching. Addressing these global challenges isn't something that we can do as individuals. We have more power as a collective, but as a collective that literally orchestrates the connection between living things, we have significant power. So let's get connected, that's why we're here, and let's talk about it. And I hope that I can keep learning from you all, and I offer you as much time and knowledge as I have to give. And as Wes Jackson, who is this very inspirational person that Mass has had the fortune of working with, said, if you're working on a problem that you can solve in your lifetime, you're not thinking big enough. So we need to think big, cooperatively and transdisciplinary. We need to heal as quickly as we've destroyed. We need to reconnect with place, where we build and grow, but also where we extract and harvest. And we need to imagine and tell the story of the future that we want, and then demonstrate it with metrics of healing. One way or another, the future is going to look very, very different. But what if it was better than it's ever been? Why not? Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm so excited to be here. What a great few days. It's just been amazing. I hope you've all been enjoying yourselves. You all have a superpower to envision the living future, our common future. I am here to talk to you about your voice, your personal voice, and the voice you have as part of a collective. That's the voice you have as part of your organization, but also our movement and all the industries of which we're a part. I've worked as a design journalist, in-house at architecture firms, and now I work on communications with firms and nonprofits, and in the built environment community. Plus, I get to co-host a podcast with the coolest nonprofit CEO on the planet, Lindsay Baker. We call it Design the Future. I encourage you to listen if you haven't had a chance, but that's what this community is doing right now, designing the future. How you communicate about what you do is as important as the work itself. It's our role to help people engage in and understand and really value this work in ways that invite them to join us. And without that cohesive communication, we will not have the opportunity to manifest the living future. But the communications ecosystems that we have all around us, as I'm sure you know, are quite noisy and very fragmented. Hyperbole and signaling are rampant, and many actors are stoking chaos and confusion. I recently heard journalist Elizabeth Colbert say that coming into knowledge is messy and contentious. It's certainly true, but it calls us to action. So the work we often in this industry, I think, feel that it speaks for itself. Lots of people believe that. But the built environment is not sculpture. And we have to translate if we want people to understand the immense life system benefits. When people see how the built environment can support them to thrive, they will engage and invest personally, and they will see the potential for a thriving future for all. Because we are not just making buildings, we are changing systems and ways of thinking. We're developing the potential to adapt and thrive within the broader living system. Before I go on, I want to learn a little bit from you, so I'd like a show of hands. First of all, how many of you have tried to convince clients about climate or health attributes of design strategies? Okay, good. How many of you have been faced with stakeholder questions about why they should care about some of those strategies that to them may seem beyond scope? Anybody? Yes? And how many of you have spoken with stakeholders using terms whose definitions were not completely clear in your mind? Anyone? Yes, good. Thank you for your honesty. And one last one. How many have struggled to protect climate or equity strategies during scope, budgeting, or value engineering? Okay, that last one was a little bit of a cheat. I wanted everyone to have a chance to raise their hands. So to raise our voices persuasively and to activate our superpower, we have to listen deeply. This should really come naturally to humans and certainly to designers, but interestingly, it is a skill that most of us are not taught, few of us practice, and all of us need to hone in this very shouty world. Nearly 2 decades ago, I wrote a book with the late Lance Hosey called Women in Green, Voices of Sustainable Design. Our first chapter was about listening, and our last was about finding our home in nature and how that can lead us to a positive future for all. I've been thinking about listening ever since. Listening to the land and to people, it will let us discover the whole living system of which we are a part and develop our potential to thrive. Life, as Janine Benyus has said, and many have quoted, creates conditions conducive to life. Listening is the key to bringing people into the process of the built environment in a meaningful way, not just as mere users, as our industry often refers to them. Listening is particularly crucial because as technical as this pursuit is, it requires love and new ways of being. Bill Reed, an architect and regenerative systems thinker, says that we should be asking not what can we do, but who do we need to be to do this work? We can invite other voices to the table, cultural heritage, climate science, and public health. The system is big and we can help choreograph, but the dance itself will evolve to its potential. We can help owners and communities be part of a cultural shift that will benefit the next generation. But this depends on translating climate, health, and equity measures into terms that make sense for building owners, municipalities, and neighborhoods by building a value frame that they understand. Too often, we're trying to convince these clients and communities of the need for regenerative or sustainability solutions rather than revealing the value and the benefits of those strategies. The value frame is really just the story. It's about how we create a system that is conducive to life and thriving. It's about a design system that includes health, climate, and justice, and is told in terms that stakeholders recognize as having value to their own lives. It's crucial to think about very carefully with whom we're talking. Like, who are the audiences? Who are we interacting with? Clients, collaborators, policymakers, and the public. And the value benefits frame can work for all of these audiences if we link design outcomes to what people care about most. And I'm not just talking about framing everything around ROI, although that's important, but this is really about understanding the implications of any given project on its owner, cost, risk, value over time, and then on the entire life system. A recent study by Potential Energy with the Yale Program on Climate Change and Melior Foundation revealed that the messages that resonate most relate to leaving a world in which our children and theirs can thrive. Protecting what we love is a common concern. And this really confirms what many of us have long suspected. Alarm is polarizing, concern is universal. You find this when you talk to people about any part of your community, you sense those things. This calls us to speak in terms of care and repair rather than crisis and despair. And it leads us to the idea of design for the possible. This is the heart of your superpower. You can show people the paths to the possible. This concept is often called possibilism. I really do not like that word as a word. I just think it's terrible, very awkward. It's even wonkier than sustainability, which is quite a feat. But it keeps sliding back into my consciousness. It is referenced in 3 of the best nonfiction books I've read in recent years, Donut Economics, Flourish, and Not the End of the World, and it is powerful because conveying the possible is really about, it's the key to inviting people to see value and join us in realizing it. Recently on the podcast, Lindsay and I spoke with architect and resilience expert Janice Barnes, and she shared her concise and guiding question, how might we? These 3 simple words invoke process, possibility, and the collective. We have to insist on using that kind of simple, clear language backed by facts. Language changes over time. Our movement, like others, has shifting theories of change, and especially as it matures and accelerates, and we can leave some terms behind and find new ones. But in order to be persuasive and actionable, we have to be absolutely clear with our words, and we have to root things in facts. The late Swedish doctor Hans Rosling's work and his brilliant book, Factfulness, remind us to temper the human instinct for the dramatic because it's getting in the way of our understanding of facts. This is actually one of 10 human impulses that he describes that get in the way of deep fact-based understanding. From all the facts in the world, our attention filter is sorting and selecting the most dramatic. So is our journalism system, but that's a separate topic. And this dramatic attention filter, I mean, it's responding. Journalism is responding to this human instinct. The dramatic attention filter makes the world look more dramatic than it is. And this is a big problem right now for us and for society. So I'm going to suggest that we start with a concerted effort to ditch the hyperbole. Quell the dramatic instinct. Keep calm. Here are 3 words I think we should never use again. They are clickbait for the choir, and they are permission to look away for everyone else that we want to engage. And that's where I feel like the real damage is from the hyperbole. So existential is my number 1. It's overused constantly, almost always incorrectly as well, and it means very little, and it telegraphs panic and not much else. Also, crisis and emergency. And I know a lot of us use these words because we feel that we are in those things. But those words are not helping us address the problems. And in fact, they are inuring people to the problems themselves because when you hear them repeated and repeated, you start to just tune them out. We have to define our terms. This is not just a word nerd exercise. It can really reveal the power of shared language. And it can kickstart a collaboration on common ground. It can also eliminate a lot of jargon barriers. If you have conversations with your client and get a feeling that certain words are just not in their lexicon, you need to move away from those and find other words that you guys can get around together and really move forward on. So I'm going to talk about a few specific words, sustainability, resilience, regenerative, and even living future. If you use these terms as you're talking with clients, or if you're using them on your website, define them clearly. It will help everyone. If you're using their variants as adjectives, even more so, interrogate that and be as precise as you possibly can be about what you mean. I mean, who would hire you to create a regenerative building if you can't say exactly what that is? Frankly, no one. So we really have to be as specific as we can. And that it's okay if next year we define it a little bit differently, because it can be a moving target. Some other ones, carbon, net, and zero. However you are using these and defining these, it's critical to unpack these terms with your clients and with communities if you hope that they will understand them and then understand the value and benefits that you're trying to reach through these things. And we need them to understand. This is not just a nice to have. We need them to understand, because without those stakeholders as ambassadors, our projects will not have the ripple effect that they could. We're basically like cutting off the impact if we don't engage them as ambassadors in that way. And then a new word, sufficiency. It's not new, but it's gaining some traction right now in the industry. So I felt it would be fun to talk about that a little bit. In architecture, it sometimes gets referred to, there's a right-sizing idea, which is a little bit about sufficiency. But this is a much bigger concept. It's really a sort of how much is enough kind of mindset. This is a really challenging one, I think, maybe for humans generally, but specifically for designer maker types. Because most designers and makers always want to be doing something more, making something more. And sufficiency reminds us that sometimes the best path is do less, use less, repair, and care. And the language clarity really will free you to unleash your superpower, to show what is possible. And that's really about designing the future, to design the future and create systems-based solutions embedded with climate, health, and justice benefits, and the potential to thrive together. Because we are actually making progress. This is something that I feel like people don't talk about very often, and that we should talk about more and try to put things in context. There are a lot of problems that we face and a lot of challenges that we face, and we tend to focus on those because we want to express the urgency of those. But there is also progress happening, and we need to do a better job of talking about some of that. And a little bit of this has to do with sort of global indicators. I mean, we have actually over time been making improvements on child and mother mortality, life expectancy, hunger, education, poverty, and access to resources. And we know how to improve air pollution, emissions, deforestation, food systems, biodiversity, ocean plastics, and even overfishing. So like the first half of that equation is informing and enabling the second half. And in the built environment specifically, drawdown of emissions is accelerating. Architecture 2030's Ed Mazria, with whom I have the pleasure to work, has been ringing this bell for a while. Nature-based solutions are gaining traction, helping sequester carbon and protect communities. Building reuse is increasing as value awareness of cultural heritage and material carbon are growing. Renewables continue to fall in price and continue to be integrated with community and cultural considerations. International engagement and harmonization are growing around policy, science-based targets, standards, and more. And we're learning from other cultures about materials and methods. We can be positive about what is possible. We can use data and evidence to build the case for value and benefits. And we can decouple a comfortable life for all from high carbon emissions. We can make things better. And we do this by moving forward together, not wasting energy on disagreements, which frankly leaves room for those pulling in the other direction. So what really works? Transformative communicators are rarely the loudest. They are transparently sharing in ways that contribute to that forward motion. And I'm going to share a few of my favorite examples in our community. The leaders at David Baker Architects have articulated their core design philosophy in clear language. This doesn't have to be translated for anyone in any region. This is a powerful, evocative statement about design and sustainability and resilience and human thriving and dignity that communicates to the public without any jargon or any of those long multi-syllable words either. DBA is a client of mine, I would like to say, but this clarity of their messaging predated my working with them. In fact, it was one of the things that attracted me to work with them. Some of you may be familiar with VMDO. They have been very transparent about what they are learning in their 2030 commitment reporting. Michelle amped and does a blog annually about their commitment results, including the results that are about building types that are not performing as well as they would like. And it's been an interesting thing to see how open they've been about that, with no pushback from clients, by the way, which is quite interesting. And LMN's Path to Zero Carbon blog series just wrapped up after 2.5 years. It's an amazing, clearly an investment in research that they have made, but what I love especially about it is how it's framed in, it's a completely open invitation to dialogue, rather than here's what we know. It's like, this is what we're learning and we want to learn more. I love that framing, and I think it's really powerful, and it's just what we need. HGA did a study with the University of Minnesota Climate Adaptation Partnership around how we are or are not addressing the tension between the lack of climate projection data and the obligation to design a built environment prepared for climate risk. This is a great example of research that explores a topic that is often overlooked or something that is sort of understood as accepted fact, and then sharing those results in the community. So to recap, listen deeply to the entire living system. Outcomes will have multiple benefits, value, and potential across the system. Build a value frame with evidence and terms authentic to your stakeholders. Use clear language rooted in facts and define your terms. Design the future for life and for systems potential. Treat climate, health, and justice as part of design. We are in a position to convey the vision of the living future. Here's a step you can take right away. Identify one thing, perhaps an element of a project, for example, that you could reframe in value or benefit terms. Investigate the topic, ideally with your stakeholders if you could, especially some of those bits that seem like accepted fact or that they're resting on some accepted notion. Make sure you're defining any word whose meaning is not commonly understood. And then diagram or narrate the challenge with the stakeholders if you can. And once you create this story, I hope you will share what you learn with me and with others. You work on place, all of you, and this is a tremendous opportunity. It's the nexus of common care. I'm going to share a quote. Place is a doorway into caring. Love of place unleashes the personal and political will needed to make profound change. It can also unite people across diverse ideological spectra, because place is what we all share. It is the common that allows people to call themselves a community. I love this quote, and as I went to make sure to confirm the attribution, I found that it is attributed to at least 5 different people. Anne Whiston Spurn, Simone Weil, Pamela Mang, Terry Tempest Williams, and Deb Habib. 5 incredibly amazing women. I honestly could not ascertain which person it can be attributed to, but what a dinner party that would be. Can you imagine? So it's unfortunate, but I'm going to continue to quote it. It's a beautiful quote. And I will leave you with another from Arundhati Roy. Another world is not only possible, she is on her way. I can hear her breathing. Thank you.
Avi, thank you. First of all, wow, Adele, James, Kira, thank you for sharing and challenging us. That's those powerful statements. Can't wait to continue that dialogue. We've all been told that we're living in the century of the city. We've also been told that a lot rides on that future. It represents a big statement, a daunting challenge, but also great opportunity. So as those of us involved in the work that we do, what are we going to do with that opportunity? How are we going to make sure that that future is bright for all, that it is universal, that that next generation has the enthusiasm that Kira just talked about? We need to make sure that we're thinking about creating great places for that next generation, and not just great places to visit, but great places to live every day. Small neighborhoods, communities, big cities all need to be great places to live. They need to have those attributes that we think about. And you may have your own list of what makes a great place to live. You may agree with what's here. You may disagree with some things, you may want to define that and debate it, but I can bet that that list is going to be complex, it's going to be comprehensive, it's going to represent a systems-based approach and hopefully address the triple bottom line, because the places that we live, the communities that we've just heard about, the work that you all do every day represents complex problems to be solved, complex challenges. And we've got to go deeper, and we've heard a lot about that even in just the last 45 minutes. When we think about the triple bottom line, for instance, how do we make sure we're not just talking about social benefit, but we're working hard to measure social value and being able to talk about the well-being of those citizens, whether it's in Rwanda or whether it's in Atlanta or wherever you may be doing your work every day. So we've got to go deeper. We've got to ask ourselves to do more. And we need to look beyond conventional sustainability solutions to make sure that the picture that we are painting of that optimistic, exciting future is a generous one, and it takes into account the complexity, but it allows us to roll our sleeves up together to tackle it. We know that it's not just about the buildings that we design or the places that we create. A big part of this story is about infrastructure and how do we relate to it? How do we take advantage of the huge numbers that are currently being spent on infrastructure systems around the world? Some already planned, some underway, some accidental, not planned, like in Baltimore. What are we going to do to make sure that the return on that investment is as absolutely big as it possibly can be? Well, that means that we have to think differently about our infrastructure systems. We have to expect more from those systems in every community where we live and work. We need to move from an idea of independent to interdependent systems of infrastructure. They need to do more than one thing, whether that we refer to that as multifunctional or even maybe next generation infrastructure systems. And there are a lot of great examples about how we may think differently about our relationship to a freeway and the benefit that it creates in our community, the opportunity that it generates for families every day of the week. Or maybe about the way that we interact and engage with our waterfronts and the relationship there that maybe has been forgotten for some number of decades in cities around the country and around the world. Or maybe it has something to do with the way that we not only think about our security and how we protect ourselves from big events and our communities from big events, but how do we actually take that opportunity to make those places even better? Through resilient solutions, through new infrastructure investments, actually improve connectivity to the waterfront and to improve the public realm for that community. Or what if we took a stormwater problem and connection to an old underutilized rail loop and turned it into a massive successful economic development generator and a model that's being viewed around the world. Hopefully for those of you from out of town, you got a chance to go to Old Fourth Ward Park or the Beltline while you're here. But almost the most amazing story, if not the most amazing story about this example, is not only that the different ways of thinking about infrastructure, but people's lives have been changed. They've been afforded the opportunity to live differently because a group of people wouldn't take no for an answer, and they pushed hard to make sure that infrastructure systems were thought of differently. And what if we began to think about how we heal gaps and division within our communities and how infrastructure and those systems, those street networks, those freeways could be reimagined as a healing element? Big visions lead to big results. Those solutions, as great as they all are, we need to make sure that we're continuing to challenge ourselves to make sure that nature is at the forefront of the solutions. Kira just talked about nature-based solutions. And we're starting to see a lot in the press, World Economic Forum, United Nations, pick your example. Not only talking about our emotional connection to nature, how it makes us feel, we relax, there's a lot of great benefit, but there's economic benefit that is now being measured, and our corporations and our large institutions are being challenged to make sure that they're thinking differently and they're responding to that opportunity and to that impact. And again, the numbers are pretty staggering. The projections that are being made about the next decade of possibility around nature-based solutions, that's an opportunity for all of us to continue to lean in and to continue to make that kind of progress. And it's an opportunity for us to ask a different set of questions, to begin to think differently about what this actually means. What do we expect from our communities, our neighborhoods, and our cities? How do we visibly illustrate the benefit of social value and those kind of solutions within our work and within the places that we live? My friend Janine Benyus was just quoted a minute ago, and we've been doing a great deal of work with her and her team, and I know they've graced this stage many times, challenging all of us to think differently about our work. We're deep believers in the power of biomimicry as a part of not only delivering nature-based solutions, but making sure that those nature-based solutions have a nature-positive impact. The definition, being clear about our words. What does it mean to be regenerative? What does it mean to have a nature-positive impact? And for those of us skipping beyond the project boundary, the site boundary, and thinking about our communities and our cities, how are we using those ecosystem lessons, the biomimicry lessons, to make sure that we're driving urban innovation? And one of the things I love about this quote is it's not just that we're trying to make our cities look prettier, but how do we think about function? Measuring performance and function is at the heart of this conversation. And how do we as designers continue to take and add a different set of factors, considerations, criteria into our process? It's very local. That first bullet really says it all. Context is everything. A solution here has to be different than a solution in Boston or in California. And if we are doing that work, we're able to step up and look for those, based on the solutions or the problems, I should say, we're trying to solve, how is it being solved locally? Who's the local mentor for that particular problem? And there are examples where we can then emulate that and come up with that functional solution that applies to our client and our project and meets those nature-based solutions and those nature-positive goals. And we can do that at every scale. Step back and just think about the work you're involved in, the scale difference, the jumping scale from across the elements of the project. Biomimicry has the ability to drive impact at every particular scale. And this quote, Kira mentioned it, I like to think about this idea of, we often talk about conditions conducive to life in the natural world. This, in my view, is a challenge not only to think about that, but as designers of communities and cities, what about conditions that are conducive to a better life for us, for that next generation that we talked about? So how are we thinking about these things at the scale, at the urban scale? Because the model is there. We can look around. Wherever we're working, the examples are there of a generous, regenerative future. All we have to do, as my friend likes to say, is quiet our cleverness and to look around, to pick up those lessons, roll up our sleeves with our colleagues, and come together to design that future for ourselves. So the challenge, maybe the question or the challenge for today, is how will we collectively, and maybe more poignantly or important, how could you use these lessons, continue to push yourself, to challenge your colleagues, to challenge your clients, to make that difference and build a more generous future? So thank you very much. It was great to be with you this afternoon.
Thank you so much to our fantastic speakers today and our fantastic speakers yesterday. Can we have a round of applause for all of them, please? As I listened to the talks today, the concept of boundaries and borders came back to me over and over again. And, Monte, listening to you, I was reminded that, when you said the regenerative future already exists, right? That nature doesn't really have hard boundaries, right? When we think of ecotones, when we think of zones, right? And then I connect that to what Adele told us about property lines. Nature doesn't really have those, rigid, this is my responsibility and this is somebody else's responsibility. And so I think how we form those connections, how we dissolve those boundaries, as James taught us, how can we think across those different layers within the built environment and the natural environment and beyond is really important. And at the heart of that kind of collective thinking is communication. And so I know, Kira, you were here helping us, do a better job of, spreading the message of what we do, but we also need to apply those lessons you gave us within the design process and how we engage with communities and how we talk to stakeholders and how we, move our work forward. So it's not just about external communication. It's really about, as you rightly pointed out, shifting our mindset and thinking about how we think about our work and therefore how we talk about our work. So thank you for that. What an amazing, amazing afternoon. I have the special privilege of introducing our next two speakers. Joining me in a minute on the stage will be Beth Heider, who's the chair of the board of directors of the International Living Future Institute, and Julie Hiromoto, who is the treasurer of the, secretary of the board of directors of the International Living Future Institute, and both giants in the world of sustainable architecture and regenerative built environment. I can think of no two better people to try and summarize and to try and distill all the things you've seen and heard this year at Living Future 2024. Beth and Julie.
Wow, what an amazing 3 days. I don't quite know how we come after that amazing collection of FutureFlow ideas. How do all of you feel? Working? Are you inspired? Are you energized? Are you ready to propel even more change? Yes, my people. Well, thank you all for being here. We just wanted to start with a moment of gratitude to say thank you. To thank you for all of you for being here with us today. Some of you traveled quite far. Some of you are local and, closing the doors to all the meetings and important calls and people that want to spend time with you to be here with us. And that's just incredibly meaningful, and thank you for that. For the first-timers and the long-timers alike. Also, we couldn't do this without the amazing ILFI and event staff. Thank you for all you do putting this together. For the speakers who generously shared your lessons learned, your beautiful stories, all those moments, and your tools and processes. Thank you. And for our sponsors, our exhibitors, and for each of your organizations for supporting you in your quest for a living future and helping us all convene this collective of like-minded voices that are going to help us realize the change we want to see. So we do have one ask of you, and that is for you to fill out the survey. Thank you for filling out the survey every step of the way after each one of these, segments. But there's also a larger conference survey, and in there we'll be asking for your feedback to help guide the next iteration of the International Living Future Institute's strategic plan.
Is this working now?
Oh,
yes?
okay.
All right. I got turned on, baby. Okay, so you brilliant people, you are the change, right? But it does not stop here. We need for you to carry it forward, go forth and make excellent good trouble together. We are in Atlanta after all, right? The great John Lewis. And your voice, as Julie just said, much more eloquently than I am right now, it's really important. It's important within your work, but it's also important to our work.
And so, we want to know, take out your phones, please. If the QR code is not working, I'll give you an email address in a second, but we want to know, this is a Wordle, so you know how those work. One word, please, and that's going to be really, really hard. But how can we take action on all the amazing things and all the change that started here? What are you going to do? So if the QR code didn't work, you can go to slido.com and enter the 7-digit code 3169115. How are you going to take action? How are we going to take action?
And we're going to take a breath and give you some time to input your one word.
I see some FutureFlow influence here. Ask.
Mm-hmm.
This is really beautiful. Thank you all. We're going to keep this up here. Beth, what was really insightful and inspiring for you from the last 3 days?
How many hours do we have?
Oh, I don't know. The clock says 25 there. Is that 25 hours or 25 minutes?
Okay, so first of all, I have to confess, I can't even begin to tell you guys how hard it was for me to leave my garden. My garden is like just exploding right now. And as I was leaving in the dark, I was taking pictures of it to bring with me so that I could at least experience it on my cell phone. And so as I'm getting on the plane, I'm like, I want to be in my garden, I want to be in my garden. But then I arrived here and I remembered that I was coming to a different garden, right? My tribe. You all just so inspire me. I mean, just in the front row, it's like my whole life is passing before me. And getting the chance to be with you and to have an opportunity to experience the endorphin high that comes with that, you know, I missed that. I was really low on endorphins during COVID, and it wasn't a good thing. And the reason for that is the opportunity to recharge the hope, to experience the genius, and the incredible assurance that though we may be surrounded by darkness, there is light. And after all, without the darkness, how could we see the stars? Julie?
I love that. You know, for me, very selfishly, the Living Future Conference is a moment, a gift to myself, a restorative gift to myself, to recharge my batteries and my brain with new thoughts, different perspectives that really challenge me to grow and think outside my comfort zone and what I'm doing every day, and to be with the leaders of policy, of building science, of human science, finance. We're all here to make new friends, to reconnect with those that we haven't seen in a while, and to learn from each other, to be challenged, to be inspired, and to continue to grow. And so I commit, one thing I'm going to do to take action, to be a part of the change, is to create more of those restorative moments for me, myself, for my team, for the collaborators and people that I'm working with.
Come hang out in my garden, we'll eat some honey.
I love that. I love your garden.
Okay, so for me, the story, I mean, I think that we have this confirmation bias thing working, all of us do, right? And hopefully we can use that force for good and not evil. I believe that we will help advance the world, save the planet, be happier people by better storytelling, right, Kira? And Marquis really, really spoke to my heart. I would say that he was misintroduced, that in fact he is a poet. And here are just a couple of things that I jotted down that he had to say. That it's not about the built environment, it's about the built community. And then what if we were to live the way we respond to emergencies? I mean, can you guys remember 9/11? I can remember it so clearly. It's like people actually let you in front of them in traffic. You know, when has that happened? I think that that's an incredible call. He also challenged us to go into the messy garage of life and pull out all the tools. And then he also noted that we need to be experts less and amateurs more, and then went on to talk about the provenance of the word amateur, which is to be or for the love of. Yeah? Julie, you're up.
I love the gifts that we all bring into this community. It's like it's everybody's birthday, all 3 days, every day.
Yeah.
And so one of the gifts that I received, I don't know if Vikram Sami is still here from Olsen Kundig. He was missing his family, so I think he might have left early. But they were working on a prefabricated product for single-family homes, and they said, if we're going to be stamping these things out all over the place, we better get it right. And so they created this carbon calculator tool that looks at the fuel source of the particular region, of the predicted energy use intensity by use category, and then said, okay, now let's set your goals for energy and carbon, and then let's see what should you do, to lower my heating load, to increase my lighting efficiency. And don't be too ambitious here, because if you slide the slider all the way over to 100%, it's gonna tell you, not possible. And so they're working on this prototype, and they're gonna share it. And they're looking for other organizations to help pilot this with them. So if you work on single-family homes, which is a big part of the challenge that we need to address, reach out to them, and let's figure out how we can test this tool and make it really robust.
I want a materials easy button, okay? I want that button. But I also want, and I've already told Lindsay this, to capture the really thoughtful presentation that Mike made that really connected the things that we know about the environment to ourselves, things we understand and care about. And I had to write down the numbers so I could share the math, but he said that, our body temperature, normal body temperature, is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, which converts to 37 degrees Celsius. And if our bodies were to warm 1.5 degrees Celsius, we would be sick. And if our bodies were to warm 3 degrees Celsius, which is the path we're on right now, we would be in the hospital or dead.
That's not good.
That's bad.
Okay, another thing that I love about this ILFI community, the family, is that we are continually searching for how can we broaden the tent. I heard that a lot today. Who's missing? What other voices do we need to pull in? And who are we, as active participants of this community, who are we inviting to come sit at the table with us? So a special shout out to Sean, who brought his new JLL friends to come talk to us about monetizing sustainability. How are we, speaking a different language, as Kira was talking about, in terms of de-risking real estate investments and looking at the whole systemic picture, but in language that the investors understand, the dollars and the cents, or the financial penalties that are coming, or the potential risk to a stranded asset. I love that.
Yeah, I had to put my big girl pants on for that talk. Well, and I guess to sort of wrap up, the other thing that I'm grateful for in reflection is that we got a heaping, helping of badass Southern hospitality. Did we not? Give it up. Give it up for all of the folks who helped make this an amazing time. I mean, the staff, the folks that were serving up the iced tea with joy and, pleasure. I really enjoyed that. And to the notion that what we're doing is, it's not transactional, it's spiritual. When you talk about what we do or the buildings that are possible in terms like redemption, it speaks to your heart, it speaks to your soul, and I think that really gets me, it really gets me wound up. The notion that we need to exchange the bad for the good and recognize our shared humanity. And also that great things don't come from comfort zones. which was quickly followed by, tell the truth, shame the devil, we're in the South. To Julie's earlier point, to bring those missing to the table, including those with lived experience, I love that expression. And so we've talked a little bit about what we would like to do to make the change, or things that have inspired us to make change. Find out what you can do to be part of the change. I, for one, can't wait to see what you'll do. And I also can't wait to see what we'll do together. That's the most exciting thing. I mean, Julie and I had like a 10-minute conversation, and we were just hitting on all cylinders, and it's like, I don't know how long that follow-up email is going to be, Julie, but you better set time aside for it, girlfriend. Go forth, be the change. Thank you.
Once again, thank you to everybody who made this feel like the South. I really appreciate that. And thanks to everybody who came from the area who hasn't been able to attend Living Future before. We did this for you guys. We're really, really happy with how it's gone, and we are just feeling full. Like literally, we had dinner with our board the other day, and they were like, y'all didn't eat too much here. I was like, yes, exactly. That's what we do. So I'm just here to share a couple of words with you before we all head out, just to help us close out and hopefully get a little momentum as we go back into our lives. So I want to remind you of something that sits with me every day, which is what it means to grow a movement. And I guess just to remind you and ask you to be a part of that. I mentioned the other day that I think about and do a lot of movement strategy work in my job, and I want to make sure that it's clear that that would be entirely futile if I wasn't doing it with you. And we are feeling really wonderful about where our movement is headed. Honestly, it just feels really great hearing all the feedback that you all gave over the past few days. Just to me personally, about how you feel like this community is growing and how the vibe of the conference feels, and our amazing staff and the energy that they're bringing to you all and to your work. It's really wonderful to hear that feedback, because we do really think that, that the momentum is growing for our work and that our best days are ahead of us. I do feel that thing that James was saying. It reminds me, my friend, Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, is about to publish a book. It's actually co-edited by one of our board members, Mark Chambers. And it's called What If We Get It Right? And James said something along those lines just now, and it made me think about what that means to keep our imagination with us. I think that's part of the idea of a living future. As Kira reminded us, I think a lot and also promise that by next year we'll have a little bit more of an elaborate definition of what we mean by living future. But I also want to say that regardless of what that particular vision is, most of the reason that we use that term is to encourage imagination and to encourage a movement that believes in changing the way that we think and changing the way that we approach. It's the process, and it's that act of thinking about the future state that we want to live in. And so I am excited to continue to do that with you all, and it feels great to just watch you talk about that together. I wanted to share really quickly how we're doing, because I want you to know that the movement's growing and just give you that momentum and motivation to keep doing the work. Declare, our program that labels products, that helps to provide transparency around the chemicals in our building materials, has been growing a ton recently. It's really wonderful to see. Thank you to Mike and Chelsea and Paul especially for this incredible work. You guys are awesome. And all the manufacturers out there, a lot of manufacturers came up to me after the conversation about alignment that I shared when we first gathered here. And it is, I think we're turning the tide on some pretty exciting, what do they call it, like cooperative competition things from what I'm hearing in the halls of Living Future. So that is very exciting. Competibuddy? Oh my gosh, I love that, see, I love that. So Just, once again, congratulations to Cheryl and Griso and the team behind Just. Apparently, you guys heard us when we announced that Just 3.0 is launched. They've gotten a ton of interest and a lot of people coming to the booth, so thank you. We're really excited to follow up with you and bring more companies into the Just community. And really, please do help us spread the word. We just want to build that into the strongest community of practice that we can. Yeah. So this is about climate leadership, but it's also really about our buildings programs. There's too many people to shout out, but Jessica and Lisa are sitting right there, so I'll give you guys a shout out as I see you there. Thank you all for this work. I will also just say, keep an eye out in your inboxes. In the next few weeks, we have a really exciting announcement coming around our zero carbon program that I think will give you just a taste of how much this program in particular is growing around the world and how much we're seeing people catch up with our ambitions for what it means to care about carbon and buildings. And yeah, let's just say they're a lot of people. So congrats to that team. And our community is growing a ton. We are so proud. Raise your hand if you're a Living Future accredited professional. Yay! I mean, of course. High fives for all of you. Thank you. We have been growing a ton on our educational work, and it's going to be a big focus of our strategic plan, I think, as long as the board agrees, but I think it's going to be a big area of growth for us in the next few years. So thank you to our education team and to everybody in the membership community that is helping to push more folks into education. There was one other thing I wanted to mention about this. I guess it's just to say this in of itself, building that community, we know it allows you to teach others, and we don't really have a great way of measuring that. But we're going to figure out, next year I hope to have a slide that tells you how many people go through living buildings after they've been built and other ways of understanding just how the ripple effects of this community. So I want to make sure, so here's another QR code. We are growing a movement together. We want to hear your feedback. We want you to stay involved in membership. So this is, you are now all members for the next year because we gave you a membership as a part of registering for Living Future. So if you registered and you are here, you are now a part of our community. Welcome to the club. And this, yes, and thanks to the team for doing that this year. So if you're wondering what that means, you can use the QR code to get connected to things. We'll also have things like technical advisory groups that are going to be looking for new members this year. We've got a lot of ways that we're going to try to engage this community more. So stay tuned for that. Use the QR code. Tell us what you think. And it is not too late to still share with us ideas in the member survey about our strategic plan. Maybe you're coming out of these few days and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I really wish ILFI would work on this one tool that I need. Tell us in the survey, please. We want to hear it. And now announcing where we will be next year. We'll be back on the West Coast in Portland, Oregon. So we're going back to our home region. We're really excited. Please mark your calendars. I have checked this time with the WELL folks and New Buildings Institute. Neither of them are having their conference on these days. Sorry about that on the WELL side. So we're going to be in Portland, Oregon. We're going to be celebrating our newest fully living building, the PAE Living Building that is in downtown Portland. So that'll be great. You can walk through that building and see what it looks like in a very different building type for those of you that got to go see Candida this year. And if you want us to come to Living Future, then just have a beautiful living building in your community and we will be there. The call for proposals is going to open in August, so you got a little time to think about and start working on the kinds of things you want to share with this community. I think that is the last bit that I have to say. So I guess I just want to say again, it is a deep pleasure to be a part of this community. We love supporting you and your work. It gets me up every morning. It gives me something to give me some hope to get me to sleep at the end of the day. I feel like you are our family. We couldn't be more honored to be a part of this community and to try to bring it together. It means a lot to me to get to be in person with folks. So thank you for getting on planes to do that if you had to. I hope you all have a wonderful year. I hope you find inspiration. I hope you find success in your communications and in your ways of doing change in your communities. I hope you learn things. I hope nature is an inspiration for you. I hope you find each other and you build new relationships from the time you spent here together. And I hope we see you next year. Thanks, everybody.